The candles trembled in the cold Philadelphia air, their small flames bowing and straightening as if they, too, were uncertain how to behave. A crowd gathered along the narrow strip of pavement beside the river, neighbors, co-workers, distant relatives, people who barely knew the man who had vanished but felt compelled to show up anyway. Disappearances did that to people. They pulled strangers together with a shared, uneasy curiosity. At the center of it all stood Emily Carter, 29 years old, wrapped in a beige wool coat that looked freshly pressed. Her dark hair was pinned neatly behind her ears. Her posture was perfect, shoulders back, chin lifted just enough to suggest quiet strength rather than pride. She held a candle like everyone else, but unlike the others, her hand did not shake. And she was smiling. Not broadly. Not in a way that would immediately offend. It was a small, controlled smile, the kind people mistook for bravery. A few murmured how strong she was. How admirable. How they couldn't imagine standing there after losing a husband and still looking so composed. Only one person noticed how wrong it felt. A woman near the back of the crowd leaned toward her sister and whispered, "Why does she look relieved?" The question dissolved into the air before it could be answered. Emily stepped forward when the pastor finished speaking. She thanked everyone for coming, her voice steady, warm, almost comforting. She spoke of love. Of hope. Of faith that the truth would come out. The words were flawless, carefully arranged, practiced. She even laughed softly once, apologizing for her nerves, and the crowd responded with sympathetic smiles. But as she spoke, her eyes never searched the river. They drifted instead toward the faces watching her, measuring, gauging, calculating. As if she were not mourning, but performing. 3 weeks earlier, her husband had vanished. No goodbye. No struggle. No blood. No note. He had left their row house in South Philadelphia on a Tuesday evening, telling Emily he was going out for a short walk to clear his head after dinner. He never came back. His phone went straight to voicemail by midnight. His wallet was later found in a trash bin 2 blocks away, dry and empty, as though carefully placed rather than discarded. The police called it concerning. The neighbors called it strange. Emily called it devastating. She cried on cue when officers first came to the house. She clutched a tissue in trembling fingers and apologized repeatedly for not knowing where her husband might have gone. She told them he had been stressed lately, work, money, the usual pressures of adult life. Nothing alarming. Nothing worth disappearing over. That first night, when the door finally closed behind the officers, Emily slid down against it and covered her mouth. Not to sob. To laugh. The sound never escaped her lips, but it vibrated through her chest, sharp and electric. She pressed her forehead to the wood and breathed deeply until the feeling passed. Then she stood, straightened her sweater, and walked into the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine. At the vigil, a man stepped forward to place flowers at the base of a poster board covered in photographs of the missing husband. Emily watched him closely. Too closely. When he turned back toward her, she nodded politely, her smile widening just a fraction. "Thank you for coming," she said. He hesitated. Of course. He was a good guy. Emily's smile froze for half a second before settling again. He really was. The man walked away, unconvinced but unsure why. A reporter lingered near the edge of the crowd, notebook tucked under her arm. She had been watching Emily since the vigil began. Not the tears of others. Not the candles. Just Emily. Especially the moments when she thought no one was looking, how the smile slipped too quickly, how irritation flashed when someone spoke too long, how her gaze hardened when a question came too close to something dangerous. "Mrs. Carter," the reporter said gently as the crowd began to disperse. "Do you still believe your husband is alive?" Emily inhaled. This was the question she liked best. It made her look hopeful. Human. "I have to," she replied. "That's what keeps me going." The reporter nodded, scribbling. "And if he isn't?" Emily tilted her head, eyes glistening. "Then I just want justice." What she did not say was how carefully that word had been chosen. Justice. Not truth. Not answers. Justice meant an ending. As the last candle burned down and people drifted away, Emily stood alone by the river. The city hummed behind her, cars, sirens, distant laughter. Life continuing, indifferent and loud. She stared at the water, dark and moving, and finally let her smile fade. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. A single message lit up the screen. It's done. No one suspects anything. Emily exhaled slowly, the corners of her mouth lifting once more, not for the crowd this time, not for appearances. For herself. And for the future she had already planned. The night her husband disappeared began like any other, and that was what unsettled the detectives most when they later reconstructed it. No raised voices reported by neighbors. No frantic calls. No shattered glass. Just an ordinary Tuesday in Philadelphia, slipping quietly into something irreversible. Emily would later say she remembered every detail. Dinner had been simple: roasted chicken, green beans, rice. She had set the table with care, placing the napkins just so, even though it was only the two of them. He had commented on it, smiling, asking what the occasion was. She shrugged and said, "Can I make things nice sometimes?" They ate. They talked about mundane things. A coworker who annoyed him. A billing error on their electric bill. The weather turning colder earlier than expected. Nothing that sounded like a farewell. Afterward, he pushed his chair back inside. Emily recalled the sound perfectly. A long, tired exhale. "I think I'll go for a walk," he said. "Clear my head." She didn't object. She never did. Walks were his habit when he felt overwhelmed, his way of regaining control over thoughts that tended to spiral. She watched him slip on his jacket, check his pockets for keys and phone. She even reminded him to take a scarf. That small detail impressed the police when she mentioned it later. It made her sound attentive. Loving. He kissed her cheek at the door. Not his lips. Just her cheek. A brief touch that, in hindsight, felt more final than either of them could have known. "I'll be back soon," he said. Emily smiled. "Don't be too long." The door closed. The lock clicked. She counted to 30 before moving. First, she turned off the stove light, then the overhead kitchen lamp. She walked into the living room and sat on the couch, hands folded neatly in her lap. For a few minutes, she did nothing at all, just listened to the house settle around her. Pipes ticking. A car passing outside. The faint echo of footsteps that might have been his, or might not. Then she reached for her phone. The call log showed nothing unusual. No missed calls. No suspicious messages. She locked the screen and set the phone face down on the coffee table. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass, distorted but recognizable. At 9:47 p.m., she sent her first text. "Everything okay?" There was no response. At 10:12, she sent another. "Let me know when you're heading back." Still nothing. By 11:03, Emily was pacing the living room, her steps carefully uneven, as though she were nervous. She rehearsed the version of herself she would need soon, the worried wife, the growing fear, the barely contained panic. She practiced it until it felt natural. When midnight came and went, she picked up the phone again and dialed. Voicemail. Her voice, recorded months earlier, chirped cheerfully from the speaker, "Hi, you've reached." She hung up before the message finished. At 12:17 a.m., Emily called the police. Her voice cracked in all the right places. She apologized for calling so late. She explained that her husband had gone for a walk and hadn't returned. She mentioned his wallet, his phone, the fact that this was unlike him. She left out the part where she already knew he wouldn't answer. When officers arrived, they noted how tidy the house was. No overturned furniture. No signs of argument. Emily sat at the kitchen table, arms wrapped around herself, eyes red but dry. A box of tissues sat nearby, opened, several used. "Did you argue tonight?" one officer asked. Emily shook her head immediately. Too quickly, perhaps, but not enough to raise suspicion. "No," she said. "We were fine. Just normal." They asked about finances, work stress, mental health, affairs. The word hung in the air when they said it. "No," Emily replied softly. "We loved each other." She met their eyes as she said it. Held their gaze. That mattered. By morning, search teams were out. Flyers were printed. Neighbors were questioned. A security camera down the street showed her husband walking past at 8:53 p.m., hands in his pockets, head down. Another camera caught him turning a corner near the river. After that, nothing. No footage of him returning. No sightings. Just absence. At 3:21 p.m. the next day, a sanitation worker found his wallet in a public trash bin. No cash. No cards. Just an ID and a folded photo of Emily from their wedding day. Emily wept when police showed it to her. She pressed the photo to her chest and collapsed into a chair, sobbing as if the air had been knocked from her lungs. The officers exchanged glances. It looked real. It sounded real. What they didn't notice was how carefully she avoided smudging the photograph. That night, alone in the house again, Emily placed the wallet in a drawer beside the bed. She washed her face, brushed her hair, and lay down as though she intended to sleep. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, counting each breath. Outside, the city continued on, unaware that a man had vanished into its shadows. And somewhere within that city, the truth waited, quiet, patient, and far more deliberate than anyone yet realized. Grief, Emily quickly learned, had an audience. It followed her everywhere, into grocery stores, onto sidewalks, through the quiet aisles of pharmacies and the noisy chaos of news cameras. People recognized her now. The missing man's wife. The brave one. The woman with the perfect smile that somehow survived heartbreak. She became careful about when she cried. Not too much. Not too little. The first television interview aired 5 days after the disappearance. Emily sat on a pale gray couch in the studio, hands folded in her lap, knees pressed together. She wore black, tasteful and understated, and a silver necklace that caught the light when she moved. The host asked gentle questions, the kind meant to guide her toward vulnerability without pushing too hard. "What do you want people to know about your husband?" the host asked. Emily smiled softly before answering. "He was kind. He always put other people first. If anyone needs help, he would show up, no questions asked." That part was true enough. Truth, Emily knew, worked best when blended carefully with lies. She spoke about the night he vanished. About waiting by the window. About jumping at every sound. About the moment she realized something was terribly wrong. Her voice trembled, just slightly, as if she were holding herself together by sheer will. When the host asked how she was coping, Emily paused, letting the silence stretch. Silence made people lean in. "One breath at a time," she said. "I don't think you ever really prepare for something like this." After the interview, the producer hugged her. A woman from makeup wiped away a tear. Emily thanked them all, gracious and composed. In the car on the way home, she rolled down the window and laughed. Not loudly. Not uncontrollably. Just a short, sharp exhale of amusement. She shook her head, as if impressed with herself, and then focused on the road. At home, the sympathy cards had begun to pile up on the dining table. Handwritten notes. Gift cards. Offers of help. One envelope contained a check from a local church she had never attended. Emily stacked them neatly by size. Friends dropped by unannounced, bringing casseroles and concerned expressions. She accepted them all, thanked them all, listened patiently as they offered theories and comfort. "Maybe he hit his head," one woman suggested. "Maybe he doesn't remember who he is." Emily nodded, eyes wide with concern. I think about that all the time. Another whispered, you don't think he'd ever leave on purpose, do you? Emily looked shocked. Genuinely offended. No. Never. Inside, something twisted, not fear, not sadness, but irritation. The audacity of the question. The carelessness of it. Leaving was what people did when they had options. He had none. She joined online support groups for families of missing persons. She posted heartfelt messages late at night, thanking strangers for their prayers. Her comments were measured, warm, deeply human. Some members privately messaged her, sharing their own losses. Emily replied to each one. Empathy was a performance she had perfected. But even as the public embraced her, small inconsistencies began to surface. A neighbor mentioned seeing Emily take out the trash unusually late the night her husband disappeared. Emily explained it away easily, she couldn't sleep, needed something to do. A coworker recalled her husband mentioning a sudden increase in their insurance coverage weeks earlier. Emily laughed when police asked about it. We were just being responsible, she said. You never know what could happen. The phrase lingered. Reporters started digging deeper. Old social media posts were pulled up, dissected for meaning. A photo of Emily at a rooftop bar 2 months before the disappearance resurfaced. She was smiling brightly, leaning slightly out of frame towards someone unseen. Who took this picture? A journalist asked during a follow-up interview. Emily glanced at the photo and shrugged. A friend, I think. I don't remember. It was a small lie. Harmless, even. But it added to the growing sense that something was curated. Late one night, unable to sleep, Emily sat on the edge of her bed and opened a folder on her laptop. Inside were documents she had memorized by now, policy numbers, beneficiary statements, timelines. She checked them again, methodically, as if reassurance could be found in repetition. The life insurance payout would take time. Investigations always delayed things. But everything was in place. Every signature. Every clause. She closed the folder and opened another. Messages. They scrolled past, plans whispered in late-night texts, reassurances, impatience thinly veiled as affection. People are starting to ask questions, one message read. Let them, she had replied. I'm handling it. Emily shut the laptop and lay back, staring at the ceiling. In the days that followed, the police grew more focused. Search efforts intensified near the river. Divers were called in. Emily stood on the bank with other families, watching the water churn, her expression solemn. A detective watched her from a distance. She never flinched. Never looked away. Never cried unless someone was watching. Grief, Emily understood, was supposed to break you. But what unsettled those who looked closely was how perfectly intact she seemed, how effortlessly she wore sorrow, like a well-tailored coat, buttoned just enough to be convincing. And beneath it, something far colder waited, unseen, biding its time. The first crack appeared not in Emily's story, but in her paperwork. Detective Marcus Hale had been assigned to the case almost by accident, pulled in when the disappearance drifted from missing person into something heavier, something that resisted clean explanations. Hale was methodical, the kind of investigator who trusted numbers more than tears. While others retraced walking routes and reviewed blurry footage, he sat in a quiet office downtown, sifting through financial records with a cup of cold coffee at his elbow. That was when he found it. A life insurance policy, opened 18 months earlier. Ordinary enough. But 6 weeks before the disappearance, the coverage amount had been increased, tripled, in fact, after a brief medical evaluation and a hurried amendment signed by both spouses. Beneficiary, Emily Carter. Hale leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. It wasn't illegal. People adjusted policies all the time. But timing mattered. And motive hid in timing. He requested bank statements next. What came back painted a story Emily hadn't mentioned. Credit card balances rising. Savings drained in small, strategic withdrawals. A personal loan taken out under her name alone. None of it catastrophic, but together it suggested pressure, quiet, creeping pressure that demanded relief. Hale circled the date of the insurance increase in red. 6 weeks. He drove to Emily's house the following afternoon, choosing a time when the sun was high and the street alive. It was easier to see how people reacted when they weren't expecting bad news. Emily answered the door with a polite smile, dressed casually now, grief softened into something more wearable. She invited him in, offered coffee. Hale declined. "I just have a few follow-up questions," he said. "Of course," she replied, settling onto the couch. "Anything to help." He watched her carefully as he asked about finances. Bills. Stress. Debt. Emily sighed, a tired sound. "We were managing. Things are expensive, but whose life isn't these days?" Hale nodded. "And the insurance policy?" Her expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in her posture, a tightening of the shoulders, a slight recalibration. "We wanted to be responsible," she said smoothly. "Planning for the worst." "And the increase?" Hale pressed. She met his eyes. "My husband suggested it." He was thinking long-term. Hale let the silence stretch. Emily held it without flinching. Outside, a car horn blared. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. "You didn't mention it earlier," Hale said. Emily's smile softened. "I didn't think it was relevant." After he left, Hale sat in his car and made a note. Defensive, but prepared. The insurance company, less interested in emotional nuance, flagged the case internally. Large payouts attracted scrutiny, especially when paired with unresolved disappearances. Their investigators began their own quiet review, cross-referencing timelines, signatures, and claims history. They noticed something else. Emily had called them twice within a week of her husband vanishing. Once to ask about procedural timelines. Once to ask whether disappearances without a body delayed payment indefinitely. It was an odd question for a grieving wife. When confronted later, Emily explained it away. "I was just trying to understand. I didn't know how these things worked." But the record remained. Meanwhile, whispers spread. Neighbors talked. Coworkers speculated. Someone mentioned overhearing a heated conversation weeks before the disappearance, Emily's voice sharp, insistent, speaking in low tones late at night on the porch. Another recalled her husband joking about being worth more dead than alive. It had sounded like dark humor at the time. Hale returned to the house again, this time with a different angle. "Did your husband have any enemies?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "No. He was a good man." "Anyone who might benefit from his disappearance?" Emily laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "Who would benefit from something like that?" Hale didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, Emily sat at her kitchen table, paperwork spread out before her. She rechecked numbers, dates, clauses. Everything was airtight. She had made sure of that. Still, unease crept in. Her phone buzzed. "They're looking into the insurance," the message read. Emily's fingers hovered over the screen. "I know," she typed back. "Stick to the plan." She deleted the message thread immediately after. What Emily hadn't accounted for was how greed left fingerprints, not visible ones, but patterns. Decisions that made sense only if you followed the money backward, to the moment someone decided that loss could be profitable. Hale met with the insurance investigator the following week. They compared notes quietly, professionally. "She's very composed," the investigator said. "Almost too much." Hale nodded. "Grief doesn't usually look like that." As pressure mounted, Emily adjusted. She cried more in public. She canceled interviews. She let herself appear exhausted. The smile softened, dulled, but never disappeared entirely. It was her armor. But money had a way of pulling threads loose. And once the thread was visible, it only took one firm tug to start unraveling everything she had so carefully stitched together. The tip came in quietly, almost apologetically. A woman called the police late one evening, her voice hesitant, as though she feared she was wasting their time. She said she worked in a downtown office building, the kind with shared elevators and anonymous hallways. She hadn't known Emily Carter well, just enough to exchange polite greetings. But something had been bothering her. "I think she's seeing someone," the woman said. Or, she was. Before her husband disappeared. Detective Hale didn't interrupt. He let the silence encourage the rest. "She wasn't careful," the caller continued. "Not at work. She met him downstairs sometimes. They didn't act like coworkers. More than that." Hale thanked her and hung up, already feeling the shape of the case shift. Within 48 hours, phone records were subpoenaed. At first glance, Emily's call history appeared clean. No obvious late-night marathons. No secret second phone. But patterns emerged, numbers contacted frequently during lunch breaks, messages sent and deleted within minutes. A single contact saved under a woman's name stood out. Hundreds of texts. Missed calls clustered around the time of the disappearance. The number belonged to a man named Lucas Reed, 32, freelance graphic designer, no criminal record. Hale found him in a cafe in Old City, hunched over a laptop, headphones dangling around his neck. Lucas looked up when Hale approached, confusion flickering across his face before recognition dawned. "You're here about Emily," Lucas said quietly. Hale didn't deny it. Lucas's apartment told its own story. Framed photographs face down on shelves. A second toothbrush in the bathroom. Women's shoes tucked deep in the closet, hidden behind coats. "She told me they were separated," Lucas said, rubbing his hands together nervously. "That the marriage was over, just paperwork left." "How long had you been seeing her?" Hale asked. Lucas hesitated. "Almost a year." "A year." That meant the affair began long before the insurance increase. Long before the disappearance. Long before Emily had ever appeared on television, weeping for a missing husband. Lucas talked. At first reluctantly, then in a rush, as though unloading the truth might absolve him of something. "She said she felt trapped," he said. "That she couldn't leave yet. That if she did, she'd lose everything." "Everything?" Hale asked. "The house. Financial security. Her reputation." Hale took notes. Lucas admitted to meeting Emily the night her husband vanished. Not near the house. Not near the river. Somewhere quieter. "She was calm," Lucas said. "Too calm. She said everything was finally happening." That sentence echoed. Everything was finally happening. Phone location data confirmed they had been together for over an hour that night. When confronted with the evidence, Emily didn't deny the relationship. She reframed it. "It wasn't serious," she said during questioning. "People get lonely." "You told him you were separated," Hale replied. Emily sighed. "I didn't want to hurt him." "And the night your husband disappeared?" Hale pressed. Her eyes darkened. "I needed support." Support, Hale thought, usually came after something happened, not before. Lucas handed over his phone. Messages were recovered, stitched back together like fragments of a larger picture. Soon, one text from Emily read, sent days before the disappearance. "We won't have to hide anymore." Another, sent hours after her husband vanished. "Stay quiet. Trust me." Lucas swore he hadn't known. Swore he hadn't helped. Swore he loved her. "She told me she was finally free," he said, voice breaking. "I thought she meant emotionally." Emily's public persona began to fracture. When news of the affair leaked, the tone shifted overnight. Comment sections turned hostile. Sympathy thinned. The perfect smile now looked rehearsed, manipulative. Emily watched it all from her living room, scrolling through her phone, jaw clenched. She had expected suspicion. She hadn't expected how quickly people turned. At a press conference, a reporter asked the question no one could ignore. "Mrs. Carter, were you having an affair at the time of your husband's disappearance?" Emily paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "But it has nothing to do with what happened to my husband." The lie tasted bitter even to her. Hale, reviewing the footage later, noticed something subtle. Relief. Not at being caught, but at being able to redirect the narrative. Affairs were scandalous, but they were also common. Messy. Human. Murder was different. That night, Emily met Lucas one last time. "You shouldn't have talked," she said quietly. "I didn't know what else to do," he replied. They had proof. She studied him for a long moment, then reached out and touched his face, gentle as ever. "It's too late now," she said. "But remember what I told you." Lucas swallowed. "What?" "That this only works if we stay aligned." When she left, Lucas sat alone in the dark, finally understanding that the woman he thought he loved had been planning something long before he ever entered her life. And for the first time, he wondered whether he had been chosen, or merely used. By the time investigators began calling it a plan, Emily had already lived inside it for over a year. Plans, she believed, were misunderstood. People imagined chaos, desperation, sudden violence. What she had built was the opposite: quiet, patient, incremental. A series of reasonable decisions that, when viewed alone, looked harmless. Only when placed together did they reveal intention. Detective Hale laid the pieces out across a long conference table: timelines, phone pings, financial records, witness statements. From a distance, it still looked circumstantial. No body. No weapon. No confession. But the shape was there. Emily's husband had not simply vanished. He had been managed, his routines studied, his habits anticipated. His evening walks were predictable. His phone battery was old. His trust in his wife was absolute. The night itself, reconstructed again and again, revealed the elegance of the trap. Emily had encouraged the walk without insisting on it. No pushing. No argument. Just subtle suggestion. A calm dinner. A gentle reminder of the stress he carried. The idea had to feel like his. Phone records showed that while he walked, Emily remained home only briefly. Minutes after he left, she called a rideshare. The pickup location was 2 blocks away, not at the house. The driver later recalled a woman who seemed focused, not upset. That woman met Lucas, as she claimed, but not where he thought. Location data revealed a narrow overlap, an alley near the river, poorly lit, rarely monitored. Emily had chosen it carefully. It was where she said goodbye to her husband. Not with violence. With certainty. What exactly happened there remained unclear, but evidence suggested assistance, someone else present, someone who stayed hidden. Not Lucas. Someone quieter. Someone who never spoke to police. A favor repaid, perhaps. Emily had returned home alone, her phone deliberately powered off for 37 minutes. When it came back on, she began the performance: texts, calls, worry. It was all timed. She had studied response windows. How long it took before concern became believable panic. How quickly police were usually contacted. She waited just long enough. The disposal, or disappearance, was the final act. No witnesses. No camera footage. Just water and darkness. Philadelphia's river had swallowed secrets before. What made the plan nearly flawless was its restraint. Emily didn't rush to collect insurance. She didn't flee. She didn't celebrate. She mourned. She waited. She counted on one truth above all others: without a body, doubt lingered. Hale knew it too. They brought Emily in again, this time without softness. "You were building a future," Hale said, sliding a photo across the table. It showed Emily and Lucas at the rooftop bar months earlier. "One that didn't include your husband." Emily stared at it, then pushed it back. "People fall out of love. You increased his life insurance. Responsibility. You told your boyfriend you'd soon be free. She met Hale's eyes. Emotionally. Hale leaned forward. You planned this. Emily's smile flickered, just once. I plan to survive, she replied. The mistake, Hale realized, wasn't in the plan itself. It was in the assumption that everyone would stay silent. Lucas hadn't. Neither had the insurance company. And the city itself had begun to speak, through tips, through overlooked cameras suddenly re-examined, through a witness who remembered a shadow moving where it shouldn't have been. Emily sensed it slipping. She changed tactics. She became fragile. Tearful. She let herself look cornered. At home, she paced, rehearsing statements, imagining headlines. She considered leaving town, but that would confirm suspicion. She considered confessing to something smaller, but there was nothing small left. Late one night, she opened her laptop and reviewed the folder again. Everything she had built. Everything she stood to gain. Her phone buzzed. They're getting closer, the message read. Emily typed back quickly. Stick to the story. They have nothing without proof. But proof had a way of emerging where confidence faltered. Hale obtained one final warrant, access to a forgotten cloud backup. Messages Emily believed were gone resurfaced, incomplete but damning. One sentence stood out. Once it's over, we can start clean. Emily had underestimated memory. Not her own, but the city's. The plan had almost worked. It still might, if luck held. If doubt remained. But as pressure closed in and the walls tightened, one truth became unavoidable. Plans built on control always fail when the controlled begin to speak. And somewhere, someone was deciding whether to stay silent, or shatter what Emily had so carefully constructed. The break in the case did not come from a confession, a forensic miracle, or a dramatic chase. It came from fear. Not Emily's, but someone else's. For weeks, investigators had sensed another presence hovering at the edges of the story. Not the secret boyfriend, not the insurance company, not even the anonymous tipsters. Someone quieter. Someone who had stayed out of sight because staying invisible had always worked for them before. Until it didn't. The call came in at 2:14 a.m. A man requested a lawyer before he would say anything. He insisted on meeting in person. He said he had information about the disappearance, but only if he was guaranteed protection. Detective Hale arrived at the station to find a man in his early 40s sitting rigidly in an interview room, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. His name was Aaron Pike. No criminal record. Worked irregular hours doing odd jobs. Lived alone on the outskirts of the city. He hadn't come forward out of guilt. He had come forward because Emily had stopped answering his messages. Aaron had known Emily long before the disappearance. Not as a lover. Not as a friend. As something far more dangerous, someone she trusted to do what others wouldn't. They had met through a chain of coincidences, mutual acquaintances, small favors, conversations that tested boundaries. Emily had learned quickly that Aaron was useful. He needed money. He asked few questions. According to Aaron, Emily approached him months before the disappearance with a vague proposition. Nothing illegal at first. Just help watching someone. Tracking routines. Reporting habits. She said she was scared, Aaron told Hale. Said she thought her husband might hurt her one day. That claim changed everything. Emily had planted a narrative early, one that explained future actions while painting herself as vulnerable. Aaron believed her. Or pretended to. The night of the disappearance, Aaron was there. Not to kill. To distract. Emily had asked him to intercept her husband near the river, to delay him just long enough. She said she needed time. Time for what, she hadn't explained. She told me not to touch him, Aaron said. Just talk. Ask for directions. Drop something. Anything. Aaron swore he hadn't seen what happened next. Swore he had walked away when Emily approached. Swore he heard raised voices but no struggle. What he did see, what haunted him, was how calm Emily was afterward. She looked done, he said. Like she'd crossed something off a list. Aaron hadn't come forward earlier because Emily had paid him. Quietly. Consistently. Enough to keep him silent. Until the payments stopped. Until the investigation tightened. Until he realized she was preparing to let him take the fall. Hale listened without interruption. This was the twist no one had seen coming, not a jealous lover, not a sudden accident, but a calculated use of a third party to insulate guilt. Emily hadn't acted alone, but she had ensured no one else knew the whole picture. Aaron handed over his phone. Messages. Location data. A final text from Emily sent 2 days before the payments ended. If anyone asks, you don't exist. That message changed the case. Emily was arrested the following afternoon. The image of her being let out of her house in handcuffs spread faster than any of her interviews ever had. The perfect smile was gone, replaced by something harder, defiance edged with disbelief. At the station, she said nothing at first. When confronted with Aaron's statement, she laughed. He's lying, she said. He's trying to save himself. But when shown the messages, the payments, the corroborating location data, her composure fractured. Not completely. Just enough. You can't prove what happened, she said coldly. You still don't have a body. Hale leaned in. No, he said. But we have intent. We have motive. And now we have a witness who puts you there. Emily's silence stretched long and heavy. For the first time since the disappearance, she looked tired, not performatively exhausted, but hollowed out. The future she had planned so carefully was slipping away, replaced by a narrative she could no longer control. Outside the interrogation room, the city buzzed with outrage. Talk shows debated whether she was a mastermind or a monster. Commentators dissected her interviews frame by frame, pointing out every calculated pause, every manufactured tear. The scandal deepened when the earlier claim of domestic fear was exposed as false. Friends came forward to deny it. Messages surfaced showing Emily mocking the idea in private. Her last defense collapsed. Late that night, alone in a holding cell, Emily finally dropped the smile. She stared at the wall, replaying each step, each decision. The plan had been so close to perfect. So carefully designed. But perfection depended on loyalty. And loyalty, she had learned too late, could not be bought forever. The truth had emerged, not in one explosive revelation, but in fragments stitched together by those she believed she controlled. And now, with everything unraveling, only one chapter remained. The one where the smile finally cracked. The courtroom was silent, almost unbearably so, when Emily Carter entered. Cameras flashed outside, but inside, it was just the hum of air conditioning and the faint shuffle of papers. She wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back neatly, and yes, her smile lingered. Not the practiced one she had used for the city, the media, or even her neighbors, but a smaller, tighter smile, one that suggested control, caution, and confidence. For years, that smile had been her armor. Now, it would be her undoing. The trial was swift in public attention, though painstakingly slow in reality. Prosecutors laid out the plan meticulously, step by step, as if building a map of her mind. They explained how she had cultivated a narrative of fear and grief, how she had manipulated a secret boyfriend, Lucas, and a willing accomplice, Aaron Pike, to orchestrate her husband's disappearance. Each detail was met with gasps from the courtroom spectators, the kind of disbelief that clings to faces long after the initial shock. Emily listened to it all. Not flinching. Not whispering to her lawyer. Her gaze was steady, scanning the room as though memorizing each face. She had imagined this moment countless times, not the humiliation, but the exposure of control. She had thought she would falter, that fear would strip her smile away. It didn't. Not yet. The prosecutors moved on to the financial motives. The tripled life insurance policy. The strategic withdrawals from joint accounts. The payments to Aaron, all calculated to ensure silence. Every figure, every date, was displayed in bright, bold letters on monitors, visible to everyone in the room. It was undeniable. Emily's defense tried to cast doubt, painting her as a grieving wife caught in circumstances beyond her control. They emphasized the lack of a body, the absence of definitive proof of homicide, and the ambiguities in witness statements. But Hale and the detectives had already stitched the pieces together so tightly that gaps were meaningless. Every claim Emily had made of innocence had been contradicted by her own messages, by Lucas's testimony, and now by Aaron's shocking revelations. When the prosecution called Lucas to the stand, the room stiffened. He recounted his time with Emily, each interaction carefully observed. His voice trembled when he admitted how he had been deceived, how he had believed he was part of an emotional journey, not a calculated betrayal. He described the text she had sent after her husband vanished. "Stay quiet. Trust me." Even Emily's defense team flinched. Then Aaron took the stand. His testimony was colder, sharper, almost detached. He described the plan Emily had orchestrated, the timing, the locations, the manipulations. He admitted how he had been complicit, lured by her charm and the promise of financial reward. But he did not sugarcoat her intent. He revealed how she had ensured no one else would know the full plan, how she had insulated herself with control and careful deception. The twist that left the courtroom reeling came from an unexpected corner. Emily's own sister, a woman who had once idolized her, stepped forward. She testified that Emily had confided in her months before the disappearance, describing fantasies of a new life and freedom from the past. She had laughed as she described how meticulous she had been in maintaining appearances. She had laughed, Emily's sister said, in a way that was too sharp for sorrow, too controlled for grief. For the first time in years, the smile faltered. Not entirely, but enough that it was noticeable. A twitch in the corner of her mouth. A blink too slow. The perfect armor she had worn for so long was cracking under the weight of exposure. The defense called no further witnesses. Emily herself did not testify. She had learned that words could betray her, that even silence had power. Instead, she sat back, watching the case unfold like a chessboard, calculating every reaction, every misstep. When the verdict was read, silence fell over the courtroom again. Guilty on multiple counts, conspiracy, fraud, and orchestrating a disappearance with intent to profit. The lack of a body did not save her, the plan itself, the manipulation, the intent, was enough. Emily's final smile came then. Small, almost imperceptible, it was not the triumphant grin she might have imagined before the trial. It was a smile of recognition, of understanding, and perhaps, of resignation. She had played the game with precision, and yet she had been undone by the very threads she had woven to protect herself. Outside the courthouse, cameras captured the public's reaction, outrage, disbelief, fascination. Commentators debated the morality, the cunning, the scandal. Social media erupted, viewers dissecting her expressions, her words, her past actions. People argued about how someone could appear so perfect, so flawless, while orchestrating something so dark. Emily was led away in handcuffs, the sun catching the navy blazer she had worn with such care. The public still saw her as composed, but now, they also saw the cracks. A smile could hide 1,000 truths, but eventually, even the strongest armor fails. In her cell later that night, Emily sat alone, staring at the gray walls. She traced the outline of the plan in her mind, step by step, and even as she acknowledged her defeat, a flicker of satisfaction remained. She had almost succeeded. Almost. Almost had been enough for months, long enough to manipulate lives, to build a secret world, to taste freedom she would never get again. And yet, in the end, the smile she had worn so carefully, her perfect armor, her shield, her weapon, finally cracked. It was a small thing, almost invisible, but to those who had watched closely, it said everything. The city had known her only in fragments. The world had loved her image. And now, finally, the truth had been revealed. Emily Carter's story was over, but her perfect smile, hiding the darkest intentions, would linger in memory long after she was gone from the streets of Philadelphia.